After my uncle came back from a 2-week trip to Italy, he somehow turned every family gathering into a lecture about how Americans were doing everything wrong. At first, it was harmless. He showed us pictures of Rome, talked about the architecture, explained how amazing the food was. Honestly, it sounded like a great trip, but after a while, it became impossible to have a normal conversation around him. Every topic somehow circled back to Italy. If someone mentioned coffee, he'd sigh dramatically and say, well, in Italy they actually know how to make espresso. If somebody ate pasta with chicken, he'd shake his head like we'd committed a crime. One night my cousin ordered pizza during a football game, and my uncle spent 10 straight minutes explaining why real Italians would never eat it that way. Nobody even asked. The worst part wasn't that he liked Italy. It was the way he acted afterward. Like the rest of us were somehow less cultured because we hadn't spent 2 weeks abroad. My parents usually just ignored it. But things finally boiled over during my grandmother's birthday dinner. Everyone was helping set the table, while my grandma brought out homemade lasagna. She'd spent most of the afternoon cooking. The second my uncle sat down, he looked at the food and sighed. You know, he said loudly, after eating in Italy, American versions of the stuff just don't hit the same. The room went completely quiet. My grandma just stood there holding the serving spoon. And honestly, that irritated me more than anything else he'd said all year. So I looked at him and asked a simple question. How long were you actually in Italy again? He frowned. About 2 weeks. I nodded slowly. Interesting, I said, because the way you talk about it, you'd think you were born there. My mom immediately gave me the warning look. The one that means, please don't turn dinner into an argument. But my uncle leaned back in his chair and smirked. Some people actually pay attention when they travel. That comment got under my skin instantly. So I replied before thinking it through. You mean the same trip where you called me because you couldn't figure out the train station in Rome? My cousin nearly choked trying not to laugh. My uncle's face turned red immediately. I should have stopped there. I didn't. And wasn't this also the trip where you accidentally ordered sparkling water 6 times because you didn't understand the menu? Now, people were openly trying not to laugh. My uncle slammed his fork on the table. That's not the point. But it kind of is, I said. You went on vacation. That's great. But acting like the rest of us are uncultured because we didn't take the same trip is getting exhausting. Nobody spoke for a few seconds. Then my grandfather quietly cleared his throat and said something that completely ended the conversation. I've never been to Italy, he said calmly, but I do know insulting someone's cooking at their own table is rude in every country. Complete silence. After that, dinner moved on like nothing happened. My uncle barely spoke for the rest of the night. Honestly, I expected him to stay angry, but a few days later, he texted me unexpectedly. I probably got a little carried away. That was it. No argument. No drama. And strangely enough, after that, he became a lot easier to be around. He still talks about Italy sometimes. But now he tells funny stories instead of acting like he returned from some life-changing cultural awakening. And honestly, those stories are way more interesting.